Edgar Cayce was an American psychic with the ability to channel answers to questions on various topics while in a self-induced trance. Today there are more than 300 books written about him, and because there is such a wealth of information available about Cayce, the archive is not going to recount his entire biography. Instead, we are going to rely on his very own words. In 1935, Cayce gave a brief account of his work. The life of a person endowed with such powers is not easy. For more than 40 years now, I have been giving readings to those who came seeking help. 35 years ago, the jeers, scorn, and laughter were even louder than today. I have faced the laughter of ignorant crowds, the withering scorn of tabloid headlines, and the cold smirk of self-satisfied intellectuals. But I have also known the wordless happiness of little children who have been helped, the gratitude of fathers and mothers and friends. I believe that the attitude of the scientific world is gradually changing towards these subjects. Some of our viewers may not be familiar with Edgar Cayce and may be wondering why he would be of interest to the archive. Well, Cayce conducted thousands of readings that were related to ancient history, including ancient Egypt, Atlantis, and Lemuria. The wealth of material provided by Cayce is such that the archive has decided to produce a 3-part series on him. In this presentation, we will get to know the man and his method. In Part 2, we will review his readings on ancient Egypt, Atlantis, the Akashic records, and the connection with the Anunnaki. In Part 3, we will take a look at many of his other readings, including his views on healing, meditation, and even Jesus. We hope you come along for the ride and learn something new. Edgar Cayce gave over 14,000 readings during a period of 43 years between 1901 to 1944. The readings are customarily divided into the following categories. He gave 9,603 physical readings. The readings were also called health readings, in which a patient would be diagnosed and a cure prescribed. For some reason, Cayce needed to be told the patient's physical location, though this might easily be in another city or state. Cayce Lord describes various incidental examples of clairvoyance in the course of Cayce physically searching for the patient. He gave 1,920 life readings. In a life reading, Cayce describes the client's present physical, emotional, and mental condition in terms of past life experience. Most inquirers were assigned past lives from about 12 main periods, including Atlantis, ancient Egypt at the time of Ra, ancient Persia, Palestine at the time of Christ, and colonial America. Several people were told of famous past lives. Cayce's son, Hugh Lynn, for example, was told that he was the Apostle Andrew. He gave 747 business readings. Cayce occasionally gave business readings, including advice on business partners, the stock market, business models, and etc. He conducted 630 dream readings. Edgar Cayce encouraged everyone to interpret and use his or her own dreams in a day-to-day life. A dream reading involved Cayce interpreting the dreams of clients. As he did with readings on many subjects, Cayce would often interrupt the person reading the dream and give an interpretation before the dream had been completely read. He would sometimes fill in parts of dreams that the dreamer had supposedly forgotten. Cayce claimed that in dreams people could receive valuable insight into their own lives and that the insight was always of use to the dreamer. Besides regular daily insight into one's life, he claimed people could communicate with loved ones dead or alive, remember past life experiences, see a possible future, and experience many other psychic phenomena. He stated that these paranormal abilities were something anyone could learn. He also gave 954 other readings. Other readings are miscellaneous subject matter that does not fit into an above category. The subject matter included missing persons, buried treasure, readings given to a spiritual development group, psychic abilities, auras, prophecy, structure of reality, geology, and many other topics. Casey readings are usually referenced using a numeric tag in which the first number is a code representing the anonymous recipient, while the second counts which reading it is, in the case of a person who receives more than one. 254-32, for example, is the 32nd reading given for person number 254. Edgar Cayce has variously been referred to as a prophet, a mystic, a seer, and a clairvoyant. Cayce's methods consisted of lying down and entering a trance or sleep state, usually at the request of a subject who was seeking help. The subject's questions would then be given to Cayce, and Cayce would proceed with a reading. Once he disengaged from his trance, Cayce said he generally did not remember what he had said during the reading. The unconscious mind, according to Cayce, has access to information which the conscious mind does not. Until September 1923, his readings were not systematically preserved. In 1922, however, Cayce revealed he had given 8,056 readings as of that date, and it is known that he gave approximately 13,000 to 14,000 readings after that date. Today, only about 14,000 are available, indicating that about 7,000 to 8,000 Cayce readings are missing. After Gladys Davis became Cayce's secretary on September 10, 1923, all readings were preserved, and his wife Gertrude Evans Cayce generally conducted the readings. Cayce said that his trance statements should be considered only to the extent that they led to a better life for the recipient. Moreover, he invited his audience to test his suggestions rather than accept them on faith. Other abilities that have been attributed to Cayce include astral projection, prophesying, mediumship, viewing the Akashic records or Book of Life, and seeing auras. Cayce said he became interested in learning more about these subjects after he was informed about the content of his readings, which again he reported that he never actually heard himself. Cayce accepted psychic experiences and ESP as a natural byproduct of soul growth. The story of Edgar Cayce's life is filled with examples of what this extra sense of communication is like. His ability to give readings in the sleep state could be labeled ESP because he somehow knew information that he had never studied, and he could see people and places and events without using his physical sight. While asleep, he could answer questions on any topic, or he could give descriptions on the individual and his or her surroundings, even though Cayce was in Virginia Beach and the person receiving the reading might be in New York City. Because there are so many different types of extrasensory communication, researchers have broken down the term ESP into further categories to help explain what is taking place. Telepathy is the ability to obtain information physically by reading the mind of another person. For example, while Cayce was in Kentucky, he gave a reading for a man in New York. He saw the man smoking a cigar, heard him whistling a particular song, saw him meet with another man about a piece of property, and saw him look over 3 letters. Finally, the sleeping Cayce heard the man telephone another gentleman and knew the gentleman's name. All of these events were later verified. Cayce was able to see with the extra sense everything the man in New York had experienced firsthand with his normal senses. Another category of ESP is clairvoyance, the ability to see information that no one else has. For example, suppose you shuffled a deck of cards and placed them face down, then went through the deck and tried to name each card. If your percentage of correct guesses was far beyond what would be expected by random chance, it would be an example of clairvoyance. You would not need to be 100% accurate to demonstrate clairvoyance, just statistically greater than random chance. On the other hand, if you tried the same experiment but had a friend look at each card and concentrate on it before you guessed, this would be an example of telepathy. Looking at one instance from the Cayce readings, 2826-1, we find the case of a person who was in Ohio while Cayce was in Virginia Beach. During the reading, Cayce correctly gave the person's body temperature. Now, if the attending doctor in Ohio had known the patient's temperature before Casey's reading was given, then this would be an example of telepathy, since Casey could have read the doctor's mind. But if the doctor hadn't known the temperature until after Casey's psychic reading, it would be an example of clairvoyance. A third category of ESP is precognition. Although some have called Casey a prophet, he himself made no such claims. He rarely made any prediction about worldwide events, mostly because these predictions are subject to countless outside influences. The fourth major category of ESP shown in the Casey readings is retrocognition, the ability to see past events. For example, in the life readings, those readings which dealt with the soul, Casey would often repeat aloud significant happenings in a person's life while going back over the years until the date of the person's birth. Casey believed psychic information is as natural as intuition or a hunch. And just because something is psychic does not mean it's 100% accurate. In time, individuals may work with their own intuition in such a way that it becomes as natural as using any of their other senses: taste, smell, touch, hearing, or sight. Edgar Casey found that the concept of reincarnation was not incompatible with any religion and actually merged perfectly with his own beliefs of what it meant to be a Christian. Eventually, the subject of reincarnation was examined in extensive detail in over 1,900 life readings. Reincarnation is the belief that each of us goes through a series of lifetimes for the purpose of spiritual growth and soul development. Casey's approach does not include the concept of transmigration, which states that it is possible for human beings to be born again as animals. From the standpoint of the Casey material, souls only occupy human bodies through their spiritual growth and developmental processes. In essence, the Casey approach to reincarnation provides a philosophical setting to the past, focusing on practical ways of dealing with this life, living, growing, and being of service to one another in the present. For him, it wasn't nearly as important who individuals had once been, or even what they had been doing, as it was paramount that they focus on the present and the opportunities and challenges that face them in this time, in this place, right now. From Casey's perspective, the reason for believing in reincarnation is not so that we can dwell upon the past or brag about the possibility of once having been someone famous. Instead, it is to enable a soul to understand the consequences of previous choices and to know that each individual is ultimately responsible for shaping and creating his or her life in the present. From the Casey reading's perspective, the past merely provided a framework of potentials and probabilities. An individual's choices, actions, and free will in the present would determine the actual experience lived this time around. Rather than being a fatalistic approach to life, it is much more one of nearly limitless opportunities. Casey teaches the reality of reincarnation and karma, but as instruments of a loving God rather than blind natural laws. His purpose is to teach us certain spiritual lessons. Animals have undifferentiated group souls rather than individuality and consciousness. Once the soul evolves through a succession of animal incarnations and achieves human status, it is not then reborn in animal form. Casey's view arguably incorporates theosophical teachings on spiritual evolution. Each person, in his view, existed in a self-conscious form before birth and would exist again after death. From Casey's perspective, we are not simply physical bodies or even physical bodies with souls, but are instead spiritual beings who are currently having a material experience. As souls, we have manifested in the earth in order to learn lessons that will enable us to return to our former state of spiritual awareness. At the same time, one purpose we all have in common is to bring the spirituality of the Creator into the earth. A soul can choose to be born into either a male or female body in any given lifetime, or, as Casey called it, an incarnation. One's experiences are subject to the choices made with free will. As one grows, he or she learns, or rather remembers, his or her true relationship with God and one's heritage as a spiritual being. With free will, we can turn the challenges life presents to us into stepping stones toward growth, or we can see them as obstacles and stumbling blocks. Either way, we reap what we have sown. We constantly meet the consequences of previous deeds and attitudes. One frequently misunderstood concept regarding reincarnation has to do with karma. From the standpoint of the Casey material, karma is not destiny, it is only memory. These memories are generally unconscious and influence our abilities, our faults, and even our relationships with others, but with free will, we can meet this memory as a positive or a negative experience. Karma provides us with the potential to learn a lesson we need in order to grow at a soul level, and free will determines whether or not we choose to learn it at this time. The choices we make determine the next set of potential experiences we encounter. From Casey's viewpoint, it doesn't really matter if an individual believes in reincarnation or not. For some, it can be a helpful concept, for others, confusing. The main purpose is to allow individuals to become aware of their true spiritual nature and their ultimate relationship with one another. In addition to his health readings, Casey gave many hundreds of so-called life readings during which he would describe his subjects' past lives. A number of those readings referred to past incarnations in the legendary lost land of Atlantis. In all, Casey referred to Atlantis no fewer than 700 times in his readings over a span of 20 years. In Part 2, we are going to delve into these readings and much more.